Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick here, dropping in on you. Hope everybody is having a great start to your day. This was definitely not the first video I had on deck to do today, but based off of all of the inboxes and emails and that I'm getting, I am going to attempt to address this issue from a uh, place of reason, responsibility, rationale, historical awareness, and so many other things that I think has to be present to make sense out of it. When you look at it from a superficial level, there are so many different opinions because there are so many different experiences attached to it that you're going to tend to view it from your own personal experience. I'm going to attempt to shed some light on it. Before we get started on this, some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you will find out in a moment. Before we do that, I want to remind everybody that we are in the midst of a fundraiser, and the way that you can support the work we do is the everything you need to know is in the description box towards the top. For those of you who are unaware of who we are, the link to our official website is also in the description box. But we definitely do need your support, and I hope that we do hit our goals for the coming next 30 plus days. So, with that being said, there's this discussion going around social media where it seems that um, a black woman who has multiple children by multiple men. This isn't a place for judgment um, at all. This isn't what this is about. We're going to talk about it all, but we're not here to judge. We're here to break down, and we're here to assess why. Okay, so she has multiple, and the father of one of the children knew his child was hungry or something. Again, I don't have the whole story. I've gathered as much as I possibly can, and the thing is, the question is he responsible for feeding the other children because they're hungry? And is he only obligated to feed his child? And is she out of line for trying to guilt him into bringing over there? And from what I understand, she took the food from the kid that was his and threw the food away because he only brought food for uh, his child. Uh, I'm going to start this out by making a statement. I think that is going to frame how I approach life myself. So I'm talking about living life at a certain level, at a standard that transcends the social norm. I think that we get real tied up in what's acceptable in society, what's acceptable in the social mainstream versus what we should be doing. And I'm a firm believer that if you're going to live at the height of your design, you have to be willing to hold yourself to a higher standard. So then the question isn't whether you should, the question is, does your character transcend your obligations? And that's the question. And then we can get into the deeper things of what's going on and why we're in this situation and why we even have to have this conversation. But as for me, and my actions have reflected it. So I'm not being hypocritical. I'm not teaching something that I have not practiced. Um, I've reared children that weren't mine. So feeding one that isn't mine is definitely not outside of the mark of where I believe we have to be at, especially with where we are as a people. First and foremost, my statement is this: your character should transcend your obligation. There's a legal and moral obligation. To me, you call that a baseline. The baseline is this is where you have to be in order to be right. And see, the problem is now everybody's worried about being right. Everybody's worried about winning. Everybody is so concerned about not being the one to lose that the children are losing. And I think that comes from the hurt, the pain, the frustration, and the brokenness that we consistently operate in and pretend that we're okay. Uh, in my 19th book, Born in Captivity, Psychopathology as a Legacy of Slavery, one of the things I point to is far too many of our erroneous behaviors and responses to things we call culture. It's not culture, it's the result of unhealed and unaddressed trauma. It's the result of not understanding what we're passing down to our progeny by way of behavior, by way of responding and reacting to things. What happens here is here's a chance to transcend something. Here's a chance for character to take a position over obligation. What do I mean by that? From an obligatory perspective, my response is to my children, to my wife, to my seeds, are those that come to me by marriage. To me, I make no difference. And that's just where I'm at. I make no difference between those who have come to me by way of relationship versus those that I have sired. I hold and love them all the same. They have never heard me refer to them as step or anything else other than my babies. And that is something that was given to me by way of my great grandmother in how I'm supposed to carry myself and how I'm supposed to love. So in that perspective, there's the obligation. The obligation is family first. But here's the thing. In the obligation of family first, as a man, my responsibility is to teach that principle to my children. Family first, right? Well, I'm about to go over and take food to my son or my daughter while his or her siblings are hungry. And I'm going to give them food and say, you eat while they don't. How is that teaching my child family first? How is that teaching my child transcendent character? It's teaching selfishness. It's teaching. And see, the problem is most people who are going to argue that point is going to argue from a position of having had to deal with, quote unquote, a baby mama that's being unreasonable. And then those who are going to argue on the other side have dealt with what we want to call deadbeat dads. And all of this stuff is a problem because we're not dealing with our issues, because we won't confront the reality that the destruction of our families has led to a bunch of single parent households with parents who have these issues and want to fight them out and have no problem using children as the tool of leverage to win. This isn't about healing. This isn't about understanding our responsibility to protect our progeny and to produce for ourselves a future where children aren't broken, where children aren't traumatized, where children aren't filled with selfish hatred, where children aren't sitting up starting behind the 8 ball in every statistical category, including mental health and wellness. Why? Because we won't put in the work. We won't get outside of ourselves. We won't look beyond the moment. Am I sitting up and saying that she was right in the way she did? Oh, hell no. From what I've been able to gather, she was way out of line. Again, there's a way to do things. And obviously there's a history. And obviously he's making a point. But my thing is the point that you're making to her more valuable than the point you should be making with your child about their siblings? Because what you're teaching them is to isolate themselves and that they are different. And eventually, if their fathers aren't coming along and doing for them, they're going to start to be treated and feel like that for some reason he's better or she's better. And again, there's the obligation. The obligation is always you take care of home first. Well, when you create a situation where you procreate and you create a child and now you're no longer in the home, your home is now extended. So it's not just what's in your home, it's the seeds you have in other homes that you're still responsible for. Um, and so now you have to be able to understand, what are my obligations outside of finances? See, if I just look at it financially, yeah, I'm just going to set it up here. And the argument is, well, she's getting child support. She should be able to take the child support and manage that. And I'm not arguing that point. But uh, if we're going to be honest, and by the way, I think the child support system is broken. It doesn't really value the kids. And the people who really need to get caught up in it are the ones who skated anyway. If you look up right now, if a guy decides he ain't paying, he's ducking. He's getting paid by cash. He's running. And the ones who are trying to figure it out and trying to make it happen and are barely making ends meet are the ones who normally get sucked into it, and we never work anything out. I don't think the system is set up for our children. I don't think the system is set up for us culturally to heal. It's a money cow. It's a political platform. It's a bunch of things, but it's not a healing process that really looks out for the kids. Don't get me wrong. There's some people that need to be sucked into it and kept in it, but that's it. So, but it is my call that if you procreate, hell, forget procreate. Any kid that has come under my covering as a man, and I've acted in the role of father for them, still has access to me. I still contribute to in some kind of way. And if they're under the age of 18, I contribute financially. That's what men do. It doesn't make me special. It doesn't make me super. It doesn't make me a great dad. It makes me a person that is handling responsibility. That's all it does. And I should be respected for it. I should be looked at, but it should be a reflection in every man that, hey, look, if I've served in the role, the one thing I told Marion's children before we got married is, regardless to what happens between us, I will never forsake you. I don't care what happens, and I will consistently honor that. Why? Because that's what men do. It's not some supernatural thing. It's just what we do. The problem is, somewhere along the way, we stopped teaching it. We stopped demanding it of our progeny. We stopped demanding it of the young boys that followed us. And somewhere along the way, it became okay to be violent. Not that men haven't always been violent, not that we haven't always cheated, not that men haven't always, through history from slavery on up until this point, had entire households outside of the one that they were living. I'm not trying to romanticize the past, but what I'm talking about, but that was a point that we were men, that we, in our mess, we took care of business. In our mess, we were less educated, fewer degrees on the wall, but we were handling our business. Now, we had some other screwed up stuff going on, again, because we haven't dealt with the trauma. We haven't dealt with the brokenness. We haven't dealt with the things that create our paradigms. We won't confront that. It's showing up in how violent we are towards one another. It's showing up how violent we are towards our women. And it's showing up in the disintegration of this push for empowerment. We don't even see it. We're so caught up in ourselves. We're so broken now that the only thing is, I'm not going to let somebody take advantage of me. I'm not going to let somebody win. And the thing is, at what point do you realize that your purpose for being here on this planet is bigger than you? At what point are you going to realize that there has to be something about the way you move that sees beyond yourself? That is one of the problems that is at the forefront of this conversation. Isn't whether or not he should, it's whether or not he has it in him to do so. No, I'm not going to take food to my child knowing that there are other children in the home that can't eat. No, I'm not going to go pick my child up and take my child to the park and leave their siblings behind. And I would hope that when their dad shows up, they show the same love to my children. Why? Because we keep saying they're the future. And if we keep treating them that way, we're treating them to be selfish. We're treating them to only think of themselves. We're treating and teaching them and conditioning them not to see the bigger picture. Now, again, we're so worried about not letting her win that we're missing the bigger picture. She's so caught up in her anger and frustration over the decision she's made and the brokenness and the hurt she feels, probably going back to her dad, that she can't see how screwed up her thinking is. And she can't see that that's not the best route and way to rear those children. Again, I'm not going to sit up here and demean her because she has multiple children by multiple men. I have multiple children by multiple women. I am not going to sit up and say I've made the best decisions. I have been in relationships I thought were going to work, and they didn't. But what I have done is I've stayed connected. No, I am not the perfect father, but I am connected and I am accessible, and you can touch me and find me, and I'm here. My oldest daughter posted one of the most beautiful tributes I can ever ask. And she consistently, that's my first, and she's my baby. Still 37 years old in September, and she still is going to be my baby. Married 16 years, and she's still going to be my baby. Even though I've entrusted my son-in-law with her well-being. But the thing is, my kids will never get too old for me to parent and to love on. And there's no difference between the biological and the non-biological. Even the women in my past will tell you that. Matter of fact, you won't be able to tell by how I handle or present or deal with my children in public which ones are which, because that's not how it's done. That's not how I was reared. That's not how I was taught. I think that we have lost the need for village. We have lost the yearning to be whole. We have become so individualized in our movements that it's only about us. We're not thinking about the children. We're not thinking about the children in so many decisions that we make. And then we want to know why they can't perform at the level that they need to perform at. We want to know why they're making the decisions they're making. We want to know why our men, our young boys and our young adult men are so violent. We want to know why we keep hearing about women, our women and our girls risking their lives to achieve bodies that they shouldn't have to aspire to because they are so beautiful in themselves. We wonder why we're struggling socioeconomically, because we can't seem to get our finances in order. And it's all being traced back to a brokenness and a hurt and a division within us that we need to heal. The fact that we've got to talk about babies and whether or not we're going to, the fact that we can be so caught up in ourselves that we can see a kid hungry and have the capacity to feed them, even if my child ain't there. Do we need to have tough love on some adults? Yes, but children didn't ask to be in that situation. Children didn't ask to be in a situation where they're hungry. Adults put them in that situation. And when I'm looking at that, I'm not trying to make a point with mom or dad. I'm trying to show love and grace to children so that they know what it looks like, what it feels like. Because they may not be experiencing it at home. We better get out of ourselves and get into our purposes. We better get out of ourselves and get into what is going to be necessary to actually achieve this liberation and empowerment we so constantly and frequently talk about. You can't get it from where we are right now. Everybody's thinking about themselves. Nobody is willing to be accountable for fixing what's wrong on the inside. It's so much easier to point the finger of blame and accusation. And what you're accusing someone of may even be accurate. But guess what? Pointing the finger at them does nothing for your situation. Absolutely nothing for your situation. You have an option. Work on self. First of all, I've got to heal the hurt. I've got to get rid of that because that hurt creates animosity. That hurt creates vitriol. That hurt creates bitterness. That hurt creates the inability to think rationally and move logically and to move in a way that advances me. So I stay stuck. Can you imagine the irony in being a person who helps people fix their lives and then to look at the people you hold to be your own and love dearly and see just how jacked up we are? And we want to say it's just no, this isn't culture. It's not who we are inherently. It's what we've become because things have been piled on us. A lot of it is not of our own doing, but we don't get to say, I don't have to deal with it because I didn't do it. You got to deal with it because it's your reality right now. 246 years of chattel slavery for our ancestors. They passed down genetically and through social learning theory and through behavior outside of that down to the next generation, outside of those who were enslaved in that 246-year period. And then we went 12 years of Reconstruction and then the Black codes and then convict leasing and 70 years of Jim Crow segregation where Black men weren't even allowed to look white men in the face. Where we were told literally we didn't exist, where we could literally be lynched. And they would freaking have a picnic at our lynching. To modern day mass incarceration, miseducation, gentrification, and all the like. We're still dealing with it, but we are going to have to find a way to cope and to heal, or we're going to start destroying. We've already turned on each other. And we don't see it. We don't see the division. Homes have been destroyed because all we can see is what I'm dealing with. And it's so easy to blame the other person. It's so easy to blame somebody. But I tell you what, if you don't start dealing within, something inside of you ought to say, I don't care what she did. These kids are not going to starve on my watch. Now, I may not put extra money in her hand, but I'm gonna drive by once a day and make sure that there's some food for them to eat. Hell, if I gotta go by whatever the cheap place in the hood is and get 20 wings and some rice or whatever, I'm gonna do something. The idea that we can sit up and watch a kid starve to prove a point. And then somebody would say, well, what if that's all he can afford? Then we need to talk about that as well. Because again, there's an answer for that. Poverty is not supposed to be your lot in life. On both sides of that equation, both him and her, poverty isn't meant for you to be your life. Your children are not a come up. They are a blessing. They are a gift. They are meant to be cherished. They are meant to be prepared. They are meant to be empowered. They are meant to be a projection of your values, your interests, your principles that go out into the world and change it and expand it and be a representation of who you are. They should be a representation of you healing, not a representation of your hurt. No, I'm not perfect, but every day I wake up and I want to be better. Every day I wake up and I have a choice. I can approach life and my day from a position of pain that I'm experiencing, or I can approach it from a position of love that translates into power. Every day, I choose that I'm going to approach life and everyone I encounter from a position of love, that I'm going to extend grace, even to those who may hurt me. Doesn't mean I'm going to let you walk over me. Doesn't mean that I'm a pushover, because you can get touched if you cross that line. It just means that I'm not holding grudges. That's a weight that does nothing but eat at you. Even if I can't deal with you anymore, I'm not going to hold a grudge. And if you're not violating me or my space or my people, move around. But if you become a threat to me or my people, I will deal with you. My first and foremost instinct is that of a protector. But all this other stuff that we carrying around, this vitriol, this bitterness, and a lot of it is actually aimed at ourselves, but we can't do anything to us, so we aim it at everybody else. A lot of it is because we're not what we want to be, not where we want to be, not happy with how we fared in life. And so everybody catches hell. You need to change your approach. And that, to me, that was a perfect opportunity to plant a powerful seed. These kids are not legally my responsibility, but my character is challenging me to rise up and do something that my legal obligation doesn't demand of me. That's how you transcend in life, period, by doing the things that most other people wouldn't. We have hurt so much that we are hurting others now. It's time for us to address this issue. I've been talking about this for so long. If you look at the books that I've written, you're going to be hard pressed not to see it in them, because it's such an immense force of destruction, a massive force of destruction, and we won't deal with it. And we just keep passing it down, and we just keep shoveling dysfunction, shoveling irresponsibility, shoveling hatred and bitterness down to the next generation. We shouldn't even have to have this talk. That should be enough love amongst us to sit up and say everybody's going to be good because everybody's going to come together. But you got to deal with the hurt. The end of the day, you can act from your hurt or you can act from love. Coffee's reviews, absolutely. Absolutely. There's this idea that we're not men unless we're hard. No, our heart needs to show. We need to love on it. For those who can't see, Coffee's reviews said, my mother was in a situation, and I remember my sister's father brought us food. And then she followed that with, I have so much respect for him, and I am in my late 40s now. I'm telling you, you can enter this day from a place of hurt and hatred and anger, or you can enter it from a place of love. And I'm telling you, there's more power in love than there could ever be in hate and in anger. You just have to learn how to use it. Because when you have power from love and you share that, you empower somebody else. And we need that right now in our communities. We need it desperately. Look, I'm not going to stay on any longer, but I just had to address that. I had to talk about it. It was definitely not how I had planned to start my day in the videos. The video I normally would want to start with, but we really need to think about what we're doing. I'm going to leave you on that note again. For those of you who believe in the work that we are doing in the community, we are in the middle of a fundraiser, and the way that you can help is in the description box. So look in the description box, click the link. If you don't like to give via the link, you can always use the organization's Cash App account, which is also listed. But we have work to do. We have a lot of work to do. On that note, I am going to get out here, get back to work. I have a client in less than 30 minutes. Well, right at 22 minutes. So I need to get ready for them. But on that note, I'm out of here. You guys have an unbelievable day, and I'll more than likely be back to talk to you again later. I'm out.